September 4th, 1942, the Łódź Ghetto. A man stands before a massive crowd. He is their leader, their protector, the only buffer between 200,000 people and the Germans. His one job is to keep his people alive. He raises his hand. The crowd falls dead silent, and then, looking into the eyes of his own people, their savior says the unthinkable. Give me your children. He is asking parents to willingly hand over everyone under the age of 10. The Germans demanded 20,000 lives, he believes. If he chooses them himself, he saves the rest. If he refuses, everyone dies. He cries as he speaks. The crowd cries with him, but the children, they walk. Rumkowski wasn't a monster. He was a man handed a choice between two catastrophes, and he chose the lesser one. Or so he thought. And that's what this is about. Not villains, but people forced to make impossible choices, and how quickly those choices start to feel entirely logical. Rumkowski wasn't alone. Across occupied Europe, the Germans created Judenräte, Jewish councils meant to govern the ghettos from the inside. The logic was simple and diabolical. Let the Jews organize their own lives and their own deaths. In Warsaw, there was Adam Cherniakow. In Vilnius, Jacob Gentz. Each found himself in the exact same trap. Cooperate, and maybe you save a few. Refuse, and you save no one. Cherniakow negotiated an exemption for the children in the orphanage. The next day, he was told, the children are going too. That same evening he took poison. He chose death over complicity. Jens chose differently. He personally led the roundups, personally handed people over. He convinced himself, I am sacrificing the minority to save the majority. He was shot by the Germans in 1943, the moment he was no longer useful. Both are dead. Both are victims. Both are accomplices. Under the crushing weight of a catastrophe, the line between those words completely disappears. And here is what's crucial to understand. When the conditions that make morality possible disappear, society doesn't collapse overnight. It adapts. New norms emerge, new justifications. First, you compromise on things that used to be sacred. First, jewelry for food, then books, then family heirlooms, then relationships, then yourselves. You're not a thief. You just took what you needed to survive until tomorrow. You're not a traitor. You just chose who mattered more. You're not cruel, you're rational. And the longer the pressure lasts, the less people remember where their old boundaries used to be. Not because they forgot, but because those boundaries just don't work anymore. This is where a mechanism kicks in that most of us prefer to ignore. Morality isn't a fixed system, it is a luxury of stability. When your basic needs are met, you have the breathing room to make choices. You can think about justice, about principles, about being good. But the moment a real threat appears, the brain does something very simple. It reassigns your priorities without asking for your permission. There is a layer of behavior we call the self, our values, beliefs, rules. But beneath that is another layer. Much older. Down there, the words right and wrong do not exist. There are only three things: danger, resource, chance. And when the pressure gets high enough, that primal layer takes the wheel, not in a sudden flash, but as a slow, creeping shift. First you justify it, then you get used to it, then you stop noticing anything has changed at all. Psychologist Albert Bandura called this moral disengagement. You don't stop being a moral person, you just redefine what morality means right now. Techniques start to emerge. The first is moral justification. I'm doing this for a greater purpose. Rumkowski did it to ensure the ghettos survived. Jens did it for the majority. The second is euphemistic labeling. The Germans weren't killing, they were resettling. Corporations don't fire people, they optimize. Change the word, and you change the psychological weight. The third is displacement of responsibility. I didn't have a choice. It's the system. Everyone is doing it. This isn't cowardice. It's a defense mechanism that allows you to keep living with yourself. And here's the most unsettling part. The brain hates conflict. If you do something that goes against your core beliefs, your brain won't torture you forever. It will simply rewrite your beliefs. Now it's a necessity. Now it's the only option. Now it's just how things are done. The inner judge disappears, not because it broke, but because it adapted. And that is far more terrifying. And if you think these kinds of psychological fractures only happen against the backdrop of black and white newsreels and concentration camps, you'd be wrong. To make morality crumble, you don't need to build a ghetto. You just need to run out of resources. March 2020, Bergamo, northern Italy. A city that just 2 months prior, no one outside of Lombardy had ever heard of, suddenly became ground zero. Military trucks were hauling coffins away in the dead of night because the crematoriums couldn't keep up. The Pope John XXIII hospital was running on 4 shifts. Dr. Daniele Maccini, an ICU physician, was 38 at the time. He talked about it later in an interview that many preferred to look away from. At one point, the ward had 15 patients on ventilators, and more were coming in. But there were no more machines left. None. In the entire province. The Italian Society of Anesthesia and Intensive Care hastily released a document, a triage protocol. It stated very clearly, in the event of a resource shortage, priority goes to those with the highest chance of survival. Age, underlying conditions, prognosis. They called it utilitarian medicine. In practice, it meant one thing. You look at 2 human beings and you decide who gets the machine. The doctor said, I trained as a physician to save lives and they forced me to choose, and he chose every day, multiple times a day. One patient is 71, has diabetes, weak lungs. The other is 54, no chronic issues, good prognosis. One machine. Decision time, 30 seconds. Move on to the next. And here is what matters. He wasn't breaking the law. He was following protocol. The document existed. It was signed. The system was working as intended. But every night, he went home and couldn't bear to look at his own hands. After the pandemic, ICU doctors reported unprecedented levels of PTSD, not from the fear of catching the virus, from something else, something psychologists call moral injury. It doesn't happen when someone acts against their values out of weakness. It happens when the system forces them to do it and leaves no other way out. Rumkowski stood on a wooden platform in 1942. Doctors stood by hospital beds in 2020. They are separated by 8 decades and a totally different kind of war. But they are united by the exact same thing. A system that created an impossible choice and trapped a human being right in the middle of it. We are used to asking the question like this. Why did people choose survival over morality? But that's not the real problem. It's not about hunger, not about war, not about a crisis. The problem is how effortlessly a human being redraws their own boundaries when reality starts crushing them. Circumstances do not break morality. They make it flexible. Too flexible, so flexible that it stops being an anchor and becomes a tool. People stop asking, is this right? They start asking, does this work? And once that second question gets asked often enough, the first one vanishes. Not immediately, but inevitably. And when we say he chose survival over morality, we automatically let the people who designed the trap off the hook. The ones who built a system where save everyone was never on the menu. This isn't an excuse. It's a different question, a much more uncomfortable one. There is one thought that's very hard to sit with. Morality isn't something we have, it's something we can afford. As long as conditions allow it, we are absolutely certain it's a part of who we are. That we would never. That we are different. But the moment conditions change, the truth becomes painfully clear. We don't lose our morality. We just trade it for a chance to keep going. Sometimes consciously, sometimes not. And there is no dramatic climax to this, no cinematic moment where everything falls apart. There is only a gradual shift, almost invisible, almost logical, almost justified. Until one day you look in the mirror and realize that the person you thought you were was only possible under very specific conditions. Rumkowski died in Auschwitz in 1944, along with everyone he tried to save. The ghetto didn't survive. History never gave an answer as to whether he was right. It only recorded what happened. The philosopher Primo Levi, himself an Auschwitz survivor, wrote about the grey zone, a place where morality doesn't disappear. It just starts costing you your life. You can only judge the people who ended up there if you are ready to answer one question, not, would you want to act differently? That's easy. But could you? I don't know the answer for myself. And that is exactly why I can't let it go.